Good afternoon. Welcome to Public Affairs, Public Access here at the Houston Media Source. Over 30 years of broadcasting in the Houston region, trying to make sure you could be informed on what's going on. And I am going to be your host, Robert McKinley Gilmore Sr. I have some very distinguished guests with me this evening. We're going to be talking about mental health, how you can find out if there are situations in your family, your community, your school that will help you address that. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves right now.
Hello, Dr. Gilmore, and good evening to your distinguished guests and panel. I'm Reverend Dr. Carl Matthews, and I represent Life Ministries, and I'm just here and glad to be a part of the discussion today. I'm sure it's very interesting.
Hello, my name is Dr. Napoleon Higgins. I am a psychiatrist, a medical physician who specializes in mental health. I am author of Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities. Thank you.
And I am Judge Lori Chambers Gray, and I'm very happy to be here.
We're so glad that you have joined us. We certainly want you to be attentive to some of the information that's going to be shared tonight. Of course, this is a unique blessing in many ways. I want to say congratulations to the judge. She was a member of the Magic, what was it called? The Magic 19?
Yes.
Could you just kind of tell us a little bit about that?
That's right. Houston 19, Black Girl Magic, made history on November the 6th when 17 African-American women running for judge ran and won. And there were two judges that were already judges. So now we all serve in different courts, across courts in Harris County, Texas.
You impact millions of people, possibly, in the course of the cases. I'm assuming that's these are civil cases, criminal cases, and different types of cases that most of you all deal with.
That's right. The judges from the 19 covered everything from juvenile courts to county courts at law, civil courts, and my court is a criminal district court. So we hear everything from state jail felonies to capital murder.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, she's been a very adamant participant in our meetings over these past years or so. So I hope that that's going to be a benefit to many of you. And she certainly has the kind of sensitivity that will give you some help. Dr. Higgins, on the other hand, has moved up a little bit. I believe you've moved to some new facilities and mental health facilities. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I had the opportunity to purchase a building. So I've moved my practice. I've been open for 16 years, and now I'm actually moving into a space that's my own.
Your own?
You know, so trying to not only take care of people, but also trying to be a good steward of what I try to tell folk as well. Yeah, so ownership in business is something that I think more of us need to look at moving forward.
Are you going to have more expanded services for psychiatric patients and those needs? Where's the location? What location are you?
We're down on 13310 Beamer Road, down in southeast part of Houston, Texas, right across from Southeast Memorial Hospital. Okay. So by being closer to a medical center, we'll be able to provide a few more services. We actually have a therapist coming on, Shanta Antwi. We'll be doing more therapy. Also, I'm trying to look for a primary care physician to come in as well. So trying to give a multiple holistic approach to our overall care, taking care of both the physical and the mental at the same time.
Very good. Thank you. And Dr. Matthews has just recently come back from a national broadcast. And could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Dr. Gilmore was quite interesting and exciting at the same time. I was invited to Mr. Steve Harvey's show. And I was invited as a bachelor. And so I left
like
as a bachelor.
TV show.
Did you leave as a bachelor?
Did you get a chance to kiss 20 women?
No, but I certainly was
Give away a rose?
I certainly was perusing the audience to see if there was any alternatives. But we had a great time. Mr. Harvey was a great host.
Yes.
And we had a good time. I mean, it's totally different than what we're doing here. I mean, when you're there on that national stage, there's no take and retakes.
Right.
What you get is what it is.
Right.
You know? And so I think that was the first time I really had exacerbated. You're talking about mental health. Right. I needed some help, dog. My whole equilibrium was just out of whack and perspiring, just anxiety at an all-time high. But good thing I've been kind of studying the power of speaking to yourself and speaking more positive things, to myself to calm down. So we got through it.
Right. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, in the Houston area, if you haven't heard, there's been a lot of attention in the last few days. There's been a tremendous impact on our environment. The ITC facility blew up, and so a lot of people were told today to stay in place, and there's a lot of anxiety. The phone lines were just lit up, and I guess, one thing I was thinking about was what are other environmental factors? How can environmental factors harm people? We live in an environment now which you have any number of triggers, and I think for some people, I know in the Houston area, some people are dreading when hurricane season begins in Houston, the Gulf Coast, because of what had previously has happened. But I wanted to talk about that momentarily because, the environment is such a fickly thing.
Absolutely.
And so what do you think it implies? Dr. Higgins, let me ask you first. How does the environment play a role in triggering people, normal, everyday people, then all of a sudden, boom?
Well, you have the issue of fear. Obviously, you have, petrochemicals on fire. They're burning near your home. And then what is the result of what are you breathing in? But even more apparent is it is actually on fire, and you're waiting to hear something go boom. So you have to worry about the impact on the community. You're seeing the fire, the uncertainty of what's going on. Obviously, you're going to also have the issue of ingestion and coming into contact. I'm not too far away from where that fire was. So
Really?
you can feel that burning in your eyes and that itchy in your throat. Now, I was saying to myself, I noticed that me and my daughter both seem to have gotten sick with the cold at the same time. But oddly enough, as the fire went down, the cold went away.
Really?
So which tells me that really what we're reacting to is the environment, the air that's around us, realizing that we have a lot of dangerous chemicals out there and the need to be able to have all the safety to go on to keep those things under wraps, but also once there is something, how to put that threat down, because realizing that is affecting your body. But also it affects your mind. It affects your body and it affects your mind. That uncertainty, what's going on? Am I going to run short of breath out here? As they canceled the sports activities for the day and everything outside of school, they were just telling us a couple of days ago that everything was just fine.
Right.
But then the fire is out, and you're now telling us not to go outside.
Right.
So which one is it? And really, it's all of it, all of it together.
And I started thinking about, they started talking about the food chain too, because now the way they're putting out the fire could affect the fish and just the life in the water. And that's an issue because of the chemicals from trying to put the fire out.
Definitely so. I know I worked for a short stint before medical school, I worked on a degree at Prairie View, a master's degree in environmental toxicology. And you have to, like the judge is saying, you've got to look at the runoff from where that goes, realizing you're right next to the Gulf, you're right next to the ship channel, and all of that has to flow out. And it's going to flow out over years. So not only do you have the benzenes and all of that going on, but also you have the fire treatment as well. So those chemicals that we're using to put out the fire have to go in. All of that gets absorbed into the ground. All that's going to get washed out to the Gulf, and all that's going to go out into our fisheries and eating places and things of that sort. Now, so that is going to be a long-term issue, and I don't know how long the news coverage will stay on for that portion of it. But it's not like it's a one-time thing. It is an ongoing.
Well, how do you see that in terms of when you look at the fear, you use the term fear, the fear that people have now, the hurricane season. You know, I mean, people nowadays in Houston, this region, when it starts raining bad.
Oh yeah, I can tell you, my office phone starts to ring off the hook when it
Really?
rains bad now. You know, so all of us have this kind of chronic post-traumatic stress issue going on that's kind of citywide. When it rains, you're asking, when is it going to stop raining, or is it yet going to be another time? You know, as we say, as the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy.
Right.
So now when it rains, and it's going to rain in Houston, and I can guarantee you it's going to flood in Houston. That's just kind of what we do. The question is, will it be that 500 or that 1,000-year flood? You know, will the heavens open up and, you know, and cover the entire or majority of the city with water of what we saw? So you're going to see people afraid.
Well, Matthews, you had a chance at one point to work with a large number of people who have been victimized, and how was that experience? Were they traumatized, and you know, people affected mentally?
Absolutely. There were two major companies. The spillage was acrylamide, which, from what I understood at that time, was something. I'm sorry, not acrylamide, but napalm. That was used in Vietnam. And when it circulated in the air and atmosphere, there were people who were very much traumatized and affected. People came from nowhere. But the reaction was what concerned me and caused me to close my office down and go to the community. And that was, they were offering people $300 and a Burger King coupon to waive their rights.
Say that again?
$300 and a Burger King coupon.
To sign on the dotted line.
That's correct.
We got to go to the courts next to find out how that functions within the framework. So,
And so after disclosing the fact, the disclaimer that I was not an attorney, however, typically how those kind of situations work is when you sign that, and I think Judge may be able to attest to this, once you sign that consent form, you waive any further recovery if you accept something so minimal. And after sharing that, good thing we had people in good places, radio, we put it out there. But the response from those who were responsible did not respond responsibly. And I noticed
to the people who
to the
were
people
expressing the problem.
Exactly. And I noticed that even in the media and them talking about it, they really tried to minimize, you know, it in terms of geographically, and that it's, you know, describing that it's sweet and it has minor effects, and using other products to try to say that, you know, we exposed to, what did you call it, benzene? Benzene every day. And I said, you know, it kind of sounds like they're trying to really, you know,
Make it acceptable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What baffles my mind is that when something like that is in the air and exposed, how can you really identify how potent it is, and how can you control air in terms of where it goes and you know, where it filters into other places? You know, so I just hope that those who are responsible will accept responsibility, like everyone should do when they're in business, and compensate people appropriately. Because, you know, you might not get an effect immediately today, but 10 years, 15 years from today, you know, that's forgotten, that's over with. And, you know, considering our healthcare system, you know, in Houston being the 49th worst, Texas rather, in the country, that can exacerbate, you know, mental disorders and dysfunctions as well. So, you know, we just have to have responsibility, man.
Counselor, I know as a lawyer, from a legal perspective, I mean, people do have rights, one way or the other. They do have rights.
Absolutely. And I think that Dr. Matthews did touch on that. Businesses need to be responsible. And I hope that's what happens in this case, because there's a lot that is going to happen as a result of, unfortunately, maybe our, you know, fish, our environment will be affected as well.
Okay. Well, that's a very interesting perspective. We've been joined by our final guest for this evening, so glad to have you,
Glad to be with
Introduce
you.
yourself to everybody.
Good evening, and thanks, and excuse my tardiness. My name is Reginald Gordon. I'm owner and project manager here in the city of Houston of a program called Operation Outreach OG1. I work with all the Harris County Juvenile Probation Department. I also am a prevention officer. I work with the areas of doing prevention before detention. I work with most of our young people coming out of that incarcerated lifestyle. So I'm glad to be with you brothers and sisters today here at the table.
And of course, you know, I didn't mention this at first, but we want to say a shout out to women. March, this is Women's Month.
Yes.
The whole idea of, you know, with the judge being here and the unique opportunity that women are taking. Our county judge, I think Judge Hidalgo, she is now a leading political representative in this area, only 27 years old. And let me see if one of those people are listening. Let me give you a definition. I try to use this. The World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now, just yesterday, I don't know if you saw the clip, but Wendy Williams was on national TV, and she admitted about her cocaine usage and how she had, for the last almost 20 years, on and off, been involved and never had gotten any treatment. Dr. Higgins never had gotten any treatment. And so they had to put her, and her husband and the son had to put her into a facility, I'm assuming like
A sobering center.
sobering center, and she's monitored.
Yeah.
She's monitored 24, but she's still, the network did not take her off the air, you know, so they let her, but it was very devastating. She had been gone for 2 months. And I was moved because I wrote a book, Hope After Dope, from a drug addict to doctor, so I can relate to that, and so many others can. But how many people can be functional? I guess that's the point I'm bringing up. How many people can actually be functional like her without that kind of support system, and need that kind of support system if they're going to even endure addiction at certain levels? In our society as a whole, I mean, Dr. Higgins, you mentioned it once before, our society, we are in an epidemic. This is an epidemic. So I know what about for young people? You see it with young people, right?
Well, I'm glad you brought that point up, and it's amazing. Out of the 30 years I've been doing this kind of work and dealing with especially young people, and I'm glad that the doors are opening and the curtains are being pulled down when it comes to this drug use. And it's sad to say that during the time of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, the crack cocaine movement, we wasn't getting this kind of support, and the people opening up about this an addiction that people having, and they're using this addiction. You got functional addiction, addicted people out here. You know what I'm saying? And she have what you call a recovery coach, a person that trails her around 24 hours a day to make sure that she's in line in what she's doing. And the new movement, since this opioid movement that hit the Americans so hard in the urban in the urban areas and the rural areas of this country, and so many young people are dying from this opioid, people have opened their eyes that recovery coaching and attacking this disease in a new way. So that's why recovery coaches is also being put in the jail. They're being put with the police department. They're being put all around in the schools now to try to monitor these young people with dealing with all these different traumas that they're dealing with and coping with the pain that they are dealing with. So that was a big move that I seen, that she was able to expose what she's dealing with, and that she is in a sobering center and that she have a sober coach to follow around. So this is the new movement, I think, gonna be welcome to our community, because you meet the people where they're at and deal with their problems as human beings instead of treating them like criminals and criminalizing the problem that a lot of these people have.
Well, do you see young people being more receptive as opposed to some old person who, does not want to succumb to the reality of their addiction?
Well, that is the area that I've been working in, dealing with, especially the population that I'm dealing with.
Right.
I deal with the population anywhere from 13 to 17, so therefore they live in a life of denial. And a lot of the young people that I deal with, they're living in so much deep pain.
Right.
And marijuana and whatever drug use they use, it comforts the pain that they're dealing with. So therefore, them kind of being connected in the movement. But as recovery coaches, we're there when they need us 24 hours a day. They can call us, because not only this is causing what you call a rising suicide too.
That's right.
That we're not really paying attention to. Our young people are killing themselves in all type of ways.
Right.
Suicide, it may not, especially in the black community. Suicide is a form of a sin that can't be recovered
Right.
in the religious community. So a lot of young people are committing suicide by cop. Right. They commit suicide by taking these drugs that we know that the new drug on the street now is called K2, which is laced with elephant tranquilizers that a lot of these young people are taking and ODing on. So young people, it takes a skillful person to get them to move them in a direction, but the key now is to stay with them until they develop, their mind develop to a stage to where you can pass them on to other recovery coaches, because we never leave them. Once they leave the juvenile recovery coaches, we turn them over to adult recovery coaches, so to follow them how long they need us, whenever they need us, and when they need us. So that's the new movement out here.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. Every day over 100 plus Americans die by suicide.
Right.
Every day. So the reality of suicide. Well, counsel, how do you view that? I know the courts have a totally different focus, but obviously you see people who in need.
What's happening in Harris County? It's a good thing, because there are specialized courts as well. So there is a drug court, there is a veterans court, mental health court. So the idea that the citizens are saying that we need to address whatever is the problem, those specialized courts can offer a specialized way of looking at it. And I think that that's where we're going as a society, or where we should be going, because the problems that we're talking about probably weren't talked about so much in years past. And so having that new information to just to look at it from a different perspective. Did incarceration work? Does treatment work? Those are questions I think that the community needs to continue to think and talk about.
That's what you were mentioning in terms of the need for treatment prior to looking at the criminal or any type of incarceration.
Totally, especially when it comes to our young people. We know that, when we send them off to be incarcerated in facilities that, further damage the problems that we're dealing with our young people, for it's being sexually abused, being, all these different issues that they deal with in the institutions, being certified as adults, being listed. I think that we in the community, we got to have courageous people to take on this mission, because we got to be honest about it. This movement, even though we may get it and fight it, it's us against the money that this system makes on our children.
Right.
So when our children become more valuable than the education system that don't invest in them, that we don't invest in them, like I said, I've been fighting this war for like 30 years, and we have to have courageous people to step outside the box to fight this giant that need to be fed. You know what I'm saying? And so happened in the last 30 to 40 years, our community have been feeding this giant in a way, because, again, the village that our children come from have turned their back on 80% of our children. The sad thing about it, that 70% of our children that we deal with have some form of mental illness, whether or not it's a mild form or a major form of mental illness. 70% of the children that's diagnosed going into the juvenile system, rather, we may take those numbers for what because the more drugs they own and the more mental evaluation they put them on, the more money they're worth to a system. So we have to really look at this thing really deep, because we're turning our children over to a system that never loved them, have not considered making treatment available for them when they're in these institutions, and making things harder for when they get out. So This new movement, like I said, is very powerful. Recovery coaching, retraining young people in the community to go out and pull back in those that think like them, that know the way how to get out that system. But in community programs is the way to go when I come to thinking to new treatment in our neighborhood these days and time.
Well, so often, you know, what you're saying is so true. You know, I think what's kind of changed the system is that the system is financially broke from what we've been doing. Essentially, the county, the state, the government, the U.S. government cannot keep up with the amount of money we're spending on incarcerating people. The fact is that incarceration is shown to increase criminality. So when you incarcerate a kid or a child or a teenager, they're more likely to result in more aggressive type behaviors simply because the systems are not built around kids. They're more likely to be assaulted while in prison. They're more likely to be assaulted while in jail by both inmates as well as by the persons who care for them. So whenever you have these kids going in and out, really you're actually creating more criminals. More criminals. When it comes to treatment, every dollar you spend in treatment of mental health of a person who's incarcerated, they give you about $3 back. For every dollar you spend on substance abuse treatment, it gives you $7 back. So actually, treatment actually creates money for the overall system, for the government. So essentially, if you treat me, if I get treatment, I get my mind taken care of, I get off my drugs, what do I do then? Once I get a job, have a safe place to stay, and I get food, I become a productive citizen and I'm paying taxes. But while I'm inside the incarceration situation, I'm not paying anything. I'm actually just consuming the money, which is really breaking the city, the county, the state.
Let's go to the phone. We have a guest. Yes, guest?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, I'm watching your show here, sir, and I'm a resident of Harris County. I was born and raised in Fifth Ward, and what I've experienced in my time, I'm 61 years old, sir, and what I've experienced in my time is when we were young folks, it was different. Where we, as we grew up, had a mission, I guess, in saying I was raised up with a father and a mother, and I'm the youngest of 9 sons, and they all worked. Everybody had a job, I'm going to say, and for us, as we were growing up, a job for us was going out mowing yards, cutting yards, riding bikes, and being part of our neighborhood, our community, if you want to say.
Yes.
And, you know, it was some whoopings, okay? They were whoopings at home. They were whooping at the schools. But they kept us in line, sir,
Yes.
okay? So as we grew up, what we had instilled in our mentality was to work, first of all,
Right.
learn how to work.
That's right.
And work was a blessing. And as you got older, you come to understand that. But these new days now, it's all about the internet, all about the cell phones, and all about the bling, as they call it.
The bling.
And that is destroying our youth.
Bling.
It's the bling, yes, sir, just the bling. It's destroying freedom. Freedom is causing the circumstances of what we're going through in what I'm going to say, our people. I'm talking about the brown people, black people.
Right.
Freedom.
Right.
We can't control it. We don't have any value of it.
Well, do you
The
think?
value of that bling controls us.
Let me ask you a question. Well, so do you think that because of this quote unquote freedom, and I agree with you, now the kids feel like they have their own individual ownership about what they want to do?
Well, sir, the problem is, sir, is that they don't know what they want. That's the issue there. That's the freedom I'm talking about.
Right.
So what they see is what they want, and they're going to go out and get it, and they're 11 or 12 or 13 years old.
Right.
Instead of going out there and cutting a yard and riding their bikes, and then back in our time, when we used to have to man up, it was with our fist. It wasn't with a gun.
Right.
And it'll be over with. On down the road, that guy you had a fight with, he's your best friend.
Right.
That's the way it works. It used to. What is it now?
Thank you so
tell me.
much. Thank you.
All right, sir.
Thank you. Very good.
And you know, Dr. Gilmore, that's why I think from the faith-based community, I work so diligently in sharing with pastors and leaders. We have to be more proactive and have more innovative approaches, practical approaches that engage the family.
Right.
You know, based upon what OG has shared, and I appreciate his work. You know, what we're talking about is youth who don't have an identity. They don't know who they are, and so they're like a piece of paper in the wind. They just, wherever they drift and land, that's what they try to become, and that's what they try to replicate. But even if you have case management, you teach an identity to a person to help them understand controlling their behaviors, you can't do that without dealing with the family. When you talk about family, it's not, he's right, it's not the same as it used to be. It's a breakdown in the family. You have babies raising babies who had no family structure, you know, challenges and what have you. And so it's just a perpetuation of dysfunction behavior.
But and he dealing with the root cause of what we're talking about today. And I tell people, and it's an old African proverb said, a child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel the warmth. We as a community to allow our children to not be managed, controlled by the family that used to protect them. PTSD you talked about earlier, which we know that, just like he was saying, just so simple rain our children are suffering from because of the trauma of the rain. We got to deal with the other traumas that, especially young black boys, that you can walk in a room and you don't see them. Because we have put that class of people, especially young black boys, of people that we don't see holds a future for themselves. So until the family structure get back at the table, have table conversations where we can discuss what goes on, not only in the family, but community issues, social issues, to allow ourselves to vent that pain out. So young people have no way to vent the pain that they deal with constantly in the daily lives that they deal with. So they have to live in a world without the embracement of what we don't have no more. It's called a village. And until we regalvanize and bring the village mentality back, then we would grab our children back in line. Because again, until the man stand up, the children will sit back down.
Well, I would say what you're saying is so important. You know, we've lost the village, but along with also what you're saying is that now, because of all the different types of access that the world has to your child through the phone, now they're raising your child and telling them what's important, realizing that much of that is extremely unrealistic and is not truth at all. So when you have these young black men, and it's black women too, when you see them growing up in a space where, one, it's an unrealistic world, and then two, you don't have that community gathering around you, you find yourself lost. Like, how do I get from here to here, and there are no steps in place? Right. Especially when we look at our current culture with our rap music, right. You know, with so much money being involved in it now, where essentially you have these rappers on the radio all the time. I went from nothing to driving a Lambo, and then how they demean our young women and whatnot. And like, well, if I don't see that as part of me, then how do I make it? If that's what women who make it do. So that becomes a bigger issue where now, as you said, 15 to 24, second leading cause of death. In the Houston area, it's dropped down to the age of 10. Age from 10 to 24, the second largest cause of death is suicide amongst our kids inside the city. 10. They're killing themselves at 10. I saw a suicidal 8-year-old less than 24 hours ago. All right? So our kids are so disconnected. Now, the problem is that we don't have communities. We don't have the community like we used to. We don't have the friends that we used to. We don't run around and play and things of that sort. Right. But when we come home, you know, now the parents got all kind of work to do on the computer. We're on our cell phones, checking Facebook. We're on Twitter. We posting on Instagram and things of that sort. And so now you don't even have the home raising the kid. So too often right now you're looking at a set of kids who are going to come out a lot differently because they don't have social connection. And a lot of parents will complain that when my kid comes home, only thing I see see them doing is they're on their phone.
So let me ask a question, Doc, and OG, maybe one of you can answer. What have been the findings of a 10-year-old problem? I mean, if it's outside of incest, sex, or abuse, or something like that? I mean, what have been some of the findings that youth may have expressed that they consider to be a problem?
Well, you know, I deal with a 10-year-old. I deal with a 10-year-old right now that's in the Hector Garza Youth Facility. Been one of my little students for a while. I've been going to visit. And a lot of times we have to, and his problem was he come from an abusive family. You know what I'm saying? Watching his daddy being abusive to his mother and not knowing how to deal with that trauma. So a lot of times young boys at that age, he was sexually assaulted also as a young. So other than the other traumas that they deal with at that age, trying to figure out how do they fit into a world. A lot of our young people nowadays think death is more sweeter than life to them because of the atmosphere and the areas that they come out of and not knowing how to vent, like you said, vent the trauma that they deal with. And just like you said, even at the age of 10, they're putting them on all these different psychotic medicines and drugs that causing these psychotic thoughts in their mind that, you know, that they're disconnected. And like I say, once you're disconnected from the love of your family, from the love of your community, and like I say, as I find black and brown boys, I mean, those are the very most gullible, vulnerable population that I deal with. And I mean, I can see from from the work I'm doing today, it's hard for me to see a changing in the future for a lot of our young men if we don't grab the community's concept back together to bring them in, to give them a vision that there's hope, reestablishing hope in the minds of our children until we feel that they can connect with the men again, a lot of our boys. Because sometimes, you know, some of the young men I deal with never have, at the age of 10, don't even know what it's like to have a masculine, manly hug without feeling violated or something else is going on here. So we have to really reconnect and bond with our young people if we're willing to save them and change their direction and change their thoughts and their mindset.
One thing that you mentioned is the trauma.
Yes.
We're not addressing trauma enough. There's the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experience study, which actually can predict when a person will die based upon the amount of trauma they had in their childhood.
Wow.
It actually kills you early. And so, and you know, and that's something like a public health issue that we're really not addressing, because 1 out of 4 girls will be sexually assaulted or molested before the age of 18. 1 out of 6 boys. And we forget about the boys, all right, who are also sexually assaulted, realizing that the majority of the assailants are men, but also women do this as well.
Right.
Women do this as well. And so what you're doing is putting in a situation where mentally you have changed the child at that point. And we really need to address that more often.
But you know, it's hard for young men to accept the word trauma and depression because in the masculine macho society that we live in, even family members criticize young black boys, even if he look as a sign of being depressed, which has been diagnosed as a disease. For black boys, to claim this here is a sign from your own family member that's weak. You just don't want to work, you're lazy. So therefore, black boys can't claim that as being a sickness of something wrong with me because that's a sign of weakness in the society that we live in. So
You mentioned the word pain.
Yes.
And you had mentioned the word fear. So is that the interpretation?
Well,
when you say pain?
Well, pain, I think pain that they're dealing with is not knowing how to deal with the internal problems that they're faced with every day. You know what I'm saying? The secrets that they hold.
The secrets.
Yes, that's one of the biggest problems that kills us, the internal secrets that they hold. Because it's been many times that young people, you know, I mean, once they let it go, I mean, you can see that just the look like they're a whole different person that light up. Once they find somebody they're comfortable with to unleash that pain that they've been dealing with all their life.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but let me just, from a personal experience,
Yes, sir.
someone's near and dear to me, you hit the nail on the head. When someone who's immature,
Right.
who's trying to identify their emotions,
Right.
and they're out of control, and don't have an outlet of someone who they think might understand,
Right.
that does become pain, that does become anguish, and anxiety does tend to increase. And so what I find is that when a young person is crying out for help,
Right.
and it doesn't appear to be any help available, or no resource or facility to go to get help,
Right.
then the easy way out is death, which is a sweet spot for them.
Right.
You know, and those of us who
Or acting out.
Yes, or acting out.
Exactly.
You know, yeah, and that depression thing. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before, but that depression thing is really. I mean, the characteristics I see is that it makes a person dysfunctional,
Right.
not able to work in the workplace. physical effects, you know. It just have a lot of layers of effects on them.
Well, so often as we, you know, when you're talking about those physical effects, pain, fear, what is acceptable for men, unfortunately, is anger.
Yes.
So a lot of times when you see that anger coming out, a person's trying to get command of the room because they are actually afraid.
Right.
And because of that fear, now I need to control the environment. So therefore I'll make the environment hostile so that now I have a place and a space in it where I can control myself and have control of my own body.
Right.
So when you're seeing those odd emotions come out, a lot of times there's trauma, but people do not want to talk about the trauma.
And you know, a good thing you said that. And we show it not only, if we can't show it on the inside, we scream and hopefully people see our appearance on how we tattoo our face down, how we put 3 different plaques, and we make ourselves monsterizing to the public. For you not to look at me or even ask me questions is the reason why I'm dressed up in this costume that I'm hiding behind.
Yeah.
Counselor, you have any thoughts on that as it relates to your legal clarity of thinking?
Well, I think that the key is education. That's the key. And you talked about the trauma. How do you get the young people to express the trauma?
It's very difficult, realizing that it's kind of like spring cleaning. I say, you know, to really get in there, you got to pull everything out the house and kind of start over. And if you don't, you're just putting layers and layers and trying to cover up the initial and the current problem. It's a very touchy subject. One, we don't talk about it, and I think the reason we don't talk about it is, as the judge said, we're not educated about it. People walk around thinking it's only them. And realizing if it's 5 people at this table, I can guarantee, chances are at least one of us have been physically, at least physically traumatized, if not sexually traumatized. Now, I'm not asking for anybody to give any kind of...
I will, because of my book, I talk about it, Hope After Dope, I talk about it, and being affected by my mother, like what you said when I was young, and hiding the pain.
Yeah.
And that was so traumatizing to me. I didn't find out later till I was in the military going through therapy. Why I did what I did. Yeah, so you're right.
But so when you therapy, you know, trying to get into the therapy and being truthful, I tell people, hey, I'll be honest with you, I can't fix a lie.
Right.
If you're lying to me, I don't know if you're lying to me.
True.
I'm a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychic friend.
Right.
All right? So if you're not telling me the full story, I don't know the full story. But trying to give that self-disclosure, and most people will find it that release is, as OG1 was talking about, that release helps out your soul just to let it go.
Right.
Just let the pain go. You know, and
So you highly recommend people finding somewhere. That's what you're saying too.
Well, you know, in this book I'm reading on soldiers,
Right.
PTSD.
Right.
Therapy, speaking heals the soul.
Correct.
So therefore, when you're able to speak it out, you can heal the pain that you're dealing with. But to go back to what the judge said, education.
Right.
Even Barbara Jordan's facts study of the institution did a facts figure on literacy.
Right.
70% of the inmates that's incarcerated in America read at a 4th grade level.
Right.
And it was already studied. If you can't read at a sufficient amount by
That's
the 3rd
true.
grade, it's going to affect you the rest of your life. And I meet so many young men that crutch that holds so you have to pretend to be something that you're not. Right. Because one thing about, especially we black men, we have a strong pride in this whole world, because that's a survival tool for us. And when you got to unveil one of the deep secrets to a person that, look, brother, I can't read. That's very painful to a population that we're circling in and out of an institution, not knowing how to get to the deep-seated problem that we're dealing with. Because not knowing how to read is a form of mental illness itself.
Right, that's true.
When you look at that 3rd grade, realizing that when you look at African American kids, we tend to perform just like everybody else does up until the 3rd grade.
Right.
You can they base jail population and incarcerated population based upon your ability to read in the 3rd grade.
Right.
If you haven't gotten it by then, you're in a load of trouble.
Right.
In that, I would say the numbers look like if you're a black male and don't finish high school, you're about 70 to 80% chance of getting incarcerated.
Right.
With high school, 40% chance of being incarcerated. With a college degree, 8% chance of being incarcerated. So essentially, the ability to command your world by being able to read and understand language is something that we must get down. I would say if any kid wants to change their situation or where they're going or where they're headed, be a good student. Being a good student can almost change anything. As my father would always tell me, being able to read and understand the information will make you turn into whatever you want yourself to be. And so, as the judge says, education, the ability to be educated helps you to be able to defend yourself.
Right.
In court, you can read just like the lawyer can read. You can get the lawyer can only help you as much as they know. So essentially, that ability to read goes in this long way. Education is essential to changing where you are.
Great thought. The closing thoughts on the need for our community today. I mean, we're talking about environmental factors, how you have to look at the environment and not be triggered. And now we're dealing with the need for parents, as the caller had stated. We are not 20 years where it used to be. I think it's against the law to corporally punish a young person nowadays. You can be arrested for it. It's against the law. So
To discipline your child, you mean?
in schools, corporal punishment has been banned, right? Is that right, OG? That's
Well,
Judge, is that right? Corporal punishment. I'm by myself. I'm by myself, audience.
Nobody wants to incriminate themselves.
You cannot paddle your child. It cannot be known to anyone, because I do know for a fact if the child comes in with any type of bruise, then it's by law, it has to be reported. So you have to be careful in terms of what you consider discipline. We talking about the term discipline. That's all I'm saying.
One thing I wanted to add in there was with environmental factors, you have to look at trauma also changes. That's an environment that actually changes your DNA.
Right.
You can see trauma passed down through generations. Yeah. As it is said in the Bible, it says that what you do now affects 3 and 4 generations down the road.
Right.
Now, I don't know what benzene in the air and fire burning around the whole city does, 6 million does to people. I really don't know. But I will say that the trauma that people experience does affect their DNA and what they pass down in their lineages.
Right. Well, I would suggest that some people, Dr. Matthews, would seek help, right? Would you encourage that?
Oh, absolutely. But, that's only effective if person recognize that they need help.
Okay.
Because denial is a major situation.
Right.
And many times people don't recognize that they need help.
Right.
One of the things that I like to just kind of talk about the need for personal development. The scripture says, what a man thinketh, so is he. And so I think because of the lack of not knowing who they are, in many cases they, identity confused.
Right.
Personal development as an elective or maybe even a course to talk about the fact that real life can affect you and your emotions can be affected, and anger is a reality, but it's how you handle those type of thoughts and emotions. I think that needs to be a part of a training. And then I hope to see that, this election is coming up, everybody's geared up. Hopefully we have some leadership that will understand the dynamics. I commend Judge Gray for being here tonight to even talk about and have the discussion. And I think other leaders need to be a part of this kind of dialogue to understand the dynamics, not to excuse anyone from the law, but at least have some kind of proactive approaches to, help create programs and initiatives that would kind of impact and turn this thing around.
Well, me personally, I think that right now in this day and time in the 21st century, knowing the breakdown of the family, the system that we're set up under, and I'm powerful. I'm very grateful right now. The word white supremacy is being spoken out right now on what's going on. That's a dysfunction that we have been suffering from that we hadn't talked about. I'm glad to see people that's in this presidential race talking about repair, reparations, repair. How do that look in our community? How do we repair? And I think that in this day and time, we have to have courageous ministers with backbones to reopen the church to be a strategizing ground for the community to deal with the ongoing problems that we have from because that's the biggest institution that black people have, that the pastors have the pulpit to deal with our people in a way to teach them things that's going on in our society when it comes to social issues. I think the power need to be put back in the hand of the pastors.
Well, now you got to realize a lot of folk have done, become 501c3s. So you can't mention political things and things of that sort. That affects the money.
And that's why I say we need to, because we know that's the biggest institution in our community. Right. Something got to break there. We have to.
We got to support those communities.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're saying we got.
Well, councilors, a found thought on the
from the judge.
From the judges.
Yes. Well, this is Women's Month, and I think it's a good time that all of us can just reflect on the roles of women. We are mothers, we are wives, we are sisters, and we're taking on roles that were not typically women's roles.
Right.
And it's a good time for our community, because they always would say if mom's happy, then the whole family is happy.
Right.
And so women need not be challenged or in any way impaired because they are a woman. I mean, they can take on whatever is their goal, whatever is their dream. They can prepare themselves and they can achieve it. And
Rightfully spoken. Found thoughts, Dr. Higgins?
Well, I would say it's great to see Women's Month. I want to commend our black women for stepping up with these judges' positions, and all throughout the political landscape. I have 2 black women at my house who I'm always rooting for, and I wouldn't be here if it was not for all the women in my life, obviously. But looking at these environmental hazards that are going on in the air, but also inside of our communities, and how to protect ourselves, engaging within the community, educating ourselves, is something that we definitely need to do.
Dr. Matthews?
I ditto everything that's been said here tonight.
You ditto?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I agree. I don't think there's much I can add to that.
Okay.
Well, I've always known my mother is a great stepping stone and been in my life. And if it wasn't for my mother, the woman that she's always been, and to seeing other strong mothers that if it wasn't for the women in the world, the prison system wouldn't be as, the advancement of the brothers that coming out the prison system wouldn't be as powerful as it is now. Due to the mothers that done traveled their time, spend their dollars, then visit with their children that's in these incarcerated areas. And you're saying, we always got to tilt our hat to the mothers and the women of our community, because if it wasn't for the black woman, where would the black man be today?
Very, very good. I wanted to end with the thought the Hawk Foundation had a strategic plan along with the city and Harris County in 2007. And some of those ideas was around public health. The idea, like what you were saying earlier, Dr. Higgins, we should focus on the whole family, the child and youth, and then promote more prevention and positive mental health. Consider the underlying factors of health overall, and then engage and involve diverse community partners. Hopefully we can start, and we'll use forums like this, Public Affairs, Public Access, which has been in Houston for 30 years, letting people bring their thoughts and minds together to share with you, the general public. But let's be reminded when we see the news and we see these stories that people are hurting. There are people who are hurting, and you could be a valuable asset. You could be a very valuable asset to an individual or family who does not know what to do. So feel like it's important for you to reach out. They have 311 numbers, 211 numbers. The City of Houston, look upon yourself to connect with your primary care physicians or other organizations like what Mr. Gordon was saying that has programs available to you, and as Dr. Matthews was saying, in the church. And if you find these problems in your family with individuals, don't take it upon yourself not to say something. I saw where 2 16-year-old friends were playing with the gun, loaded gun, and one is dead today, and the other is traumatized, and the whole family's traumatized. But playing with a gun is not a toy. And so at 16 years old, you're supposed to know the difference. You're supposed to know that that is not a toy. And somebody in the family, the community, dropped the ball. So we all are affected. We pray for those family members, but we all are affected. The community is affected. So just remember that as we try to push on to the next month or the next day. And just remember you have services that are available to you in Houston and Harris County. Reach out. We don't need to have suicide number 2, as Dr. Higgs was saying, as young as 10 years old. That is just ridiculous. And so let's make sure in the next few days or months when you're looking around in your family or your community, you can find some help for some people and some resources. It's there, okay? I want to thank the guests again, the roundtable. We certainly are grateful for the opportunity to share with you, our viewing audience, and Public Affairs, Public Access is brought to you on a regular basis here at the Houston Media Source. And you need to support this station because this station supports you. I've been your host tonight, Robert McKinley Gilmore Sr. It's always a blessing just to be here. Until next time, sleep well.